Now, even South Korea was caught off guard by this meeting. The South Korean government was unaware of the meeting until it became public. But now the meeting between North Korea and China is very, very public. And so the next move would be the meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un itself. When, where, what are all undecided, at least publicly, that is. So what can we glean from this meeting of communist minds? Joining me now from Washington, D.C., policy advisor for America First Policies, Alex Titus. Alex, significance of the meeting, I think it's rather significant. I want to get your opinion, of course. But it's interesting the way this thing unfolded. We have this mystery train, so-called, that pulls into Beijing, and out pops Kim Jong-un. So that it started off with a cloak of secrecy, and then it ends with a very, very public unison kind of message between China and North Korea. So what's the significance here?
You're certainly right. It did start off with a very interesting, reporters reported about 3 days in advance that there was a armored train pulling into China, which looked like it was carrying leadership from the North Korean regime. And as you said, Kim Jong-un popped right out of the train, and we learned after that high talks had been taking place between the North Korean leader and the Chinese president, which is historic. This is the first meeting that Kim Jong-un has had with an outside head of state since he came to power in 2011. But I think the real historic significance here is that the talks between the two, Kim Jong-un agreed to full denuclearization in North Korea. I mean, this is astounding just months ago, hearing that Kim was planning on blowing up the United States, Kim was planning on blowing up the world. And I think really you got to give this talk some credit to the Trump administration, who has continued to put maximum pressure on the North Korean regime, continued to put aggressive sanctions, continued to threaten military options. And I think people have to know that this talk was probably forced so that Kim can try to sort of swell up support ahead of his talk with Donald Trump. But you have to give Trump credit for helping bring Kim to the table.
Indeed. I think the no more appeasement is working. I think this is an indication that no more appeasement is working, and the Trump approach is better than what had been happening the last couple of decades with vis-a-vis North Korea. And I think it also could be an indication that the situation in North Korea for the people of North Korea, not Kim Jong-un and his family and his immediate people who surround him, but the people of North Korea, this could be a desperate situation where they could be literally at the point where they're on their knees as a society. And we have reports out of North Korea that people are surviving by eating dirt and things like that. So I think it could be an indicator that the sanctions, yes, they are working, and unfortunately they're probably working too well on the good people of North Korea, but it's an indication, the fact that he's willing to walk away potentially from the one trump card that he has, and that's nuclear facilities and nuclear weapons. I think that's a huge development.
Oh, you're definitely right. And just in terms of the sanctions from the United States on North Korea is not a new policy. Obama had them in place, Bush had them in place, Clinton had them in place. But the real difference here is that when Trump put sanctions on North Korea, he forced other countries to actually enforce the sanctions that they had originally put on. For example, China in the past has continuously allowed North Korea to skirt its sanctions, but you see pieces now in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journals of how business has just died down basically on the Chinese-North Korean border because they're actually being forced to force the sanctions that they had agreed to put on the regime. And you're definitely right that the people must be really feeling it, because not only has Kim cut back on funding with some different state activities such as military parades, military marches, and things of that sort, but Army officers are actually being told to leave their posts and literally leave for 6 months to go and try to find food for themselves and their soldiers, which is just an astounding development.
Not a good sign. I think you're right. I think the Trump administration put the pressure on these countries that still engaged in trade to North Korea, for example, Russia, and closed those loopholes. They've been able to put the squeeze on all of these countries that were violating the sanctions in effect, and that's no longer happening. So that's a huge development. Now, when you look at it from the lens of China and why they would make this move, I think that there are probably some obvious reasons. One, they want to show the world that they're engaged in this process, in quote, the peace process, the denuclearization process. In other words, they want to look like the good guys. At the same time, I think the communist countries, birds of feather, they probably want to stick together. But one would imagine that at the same time, while they're talking about this potential meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, that the two sides, China and North Korea, are also talking about how they can give China can give some sort of sanctions relief to North Korea. In other words, he probably went there on a mission for help.
Oh, you're certainly right. They are really feeling the pressure right now in North Korea from these sanctions. And actually, what's really shocking is that even North Korea state media has recognized that these sanctions are taking a toll. And if you have the propaganda machine of North Korea saying that these actions are hurting, then it must truly be hurting. But I think you're definitely right that China is really looking to play a bigger role in this conflict. President Xi is trying to expand his sort of global presence, his global dominance on the world stage, and he really wants to play a part in these talks, even though he obviously wasn't invited or welcome to. But China really wants to help out its fellow communist regime and make sure that Kim Jong can stay up and serve as a counter to South Korea, the United States, and Japan. But China is also very worried about a potential crisis on its own border with hundreds of thousands of poor, uneducated North Koreans potentially flooding over if there was any sort of major war or major humanitarian crisis. So if these talks don't go well and things do continue to escalate, China recognizes that also hurts their position as well.
President Trump tweeting about this. I have two tweets, and the first one is received message last night from Xi Jinping of China that his meeting with Kim Jong-un went very well and that Kim looks forward to his meeting with me. In the meantime, and unfortunately, maximum sanctions and pressure must be maintained at all costs. And a second tweet from President Trump goes like this. For years and through many administrations, everyone said that peace and the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula was not even a small possibility. Now there is a good chance that Kim Jong-un will do what is right for his people and for humanity. Look forward to our meeting. Sounds like, we don't know. We're not privy to what the White House knows, but it sounds like there is indeed a meeting in the works. He sounds pretty confident that it's going to take place. And so if it does, I think it's important that the White House, and for that matter, North Korea, they go in there with some sort of foundation of agreement to begin with, because the last thing you want to do is emerge from a meeting like this with nothing.
You're exactly right, especially just with the historical significance of this being the first time that a U.S. president will meet with a North Korean leader. And actually, it was just announced 10 days ago that some South Korean diplomats, former U.S. diplomats, and representatives of the North Korean regime actually are meeting in Finland. Now, it's unclear exactly what the sort of negotiations or what those talks are about, but that was announced about 10 days ago that is happening. So some other experts see that as sort of a precursor of what any talks could take place. But I think that you will see this actually happen. I know some people have doubted it, but the pressure on North Korea is just so immense right now, not only from the sanctions, but let's take a look at Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, who will now be taking prominent positions in the Trump administration. Both of these individuals are some of the most hawkish foreign policy leaders against North Korea. And I think if you're Kim Jong-un, that has got to be a scary position to be in, to know that your regime is running dry on funding. And now Trump, who brings sort of an own unpredictability in himself, has appointed two hawks who have continuously called for a possibility of a limited strike against North Korea if it does come down to that. So I really think that you are going to see Kim take these talks very seriously and go into this knowing that things need to de-escalate.
Yeah, and if I know President Trump and the art of the deal, he'll go into the meeting under promising and hopefully emerging over delivering. Alex, thank you.